Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Falakemi Osho, and I am the General Manager here at HoaQ. And today I'm joined by two exciting individuals, and we will be talking about Africa's AI moment. But before we get right into conversations, for those of you that are joining us for the very first time, I see a lot of new faces, new names. So I'm super excited to have you join us. We do these sessions every last Thursday of the month where we talk about different topics around the ecosystem, bring in professionals, operators to come educate us about what is going on in the ecosystem. Next slide. If you're seeing HoaQ for the very first time and you're wondering who we are, HoaQ is a community of angel investors that are backing businesses building for Africa or for Africans in the diaspora. We started HoaQ in 2020. What started as a two-man community has now grown to over 1,000 angel investors in the continent. We've backed over 100 startups from fintech, insurtech, you name it, we've backed them, to deep tech, we've backed such businesses. Our mission at HoaQ is to support founders who are leveraging technology to build economic infrastructure for Africa and for Africans in the diaspora. Next slide. Like I mentioned, over 120 portfolio companies, we've deployed over $4 million now into the startups, over 900 angel investors, and so far we've seen 12 exits. Next slide. We've invested across various countries. We have Nigeria, Uganda, West Africa, East Africa, North America, and in the UK as well. Okay, now to the reason why everyone is here today. We would be discussing Africa's AI moment. I'm joined by Hasan and Chinasa just to get us, grounded. I'll start with you, Chinasa. Can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and what you've done in the AI community?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I'll start by saying I'm a very proud HoaQ member. I've been a member since 2020. I've invested about 30 startups or so with the syndicate. So been very involved in the community. Actually, I also recently met Joe in Morocco a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, so to give some context about myself, I have a PhD in computer science from Cornell University. I focus on socio-technical systems, particularly AI and human-computer interaction. And then after that, I started my career at a think tank called Brookings in Washington, D.C., where my work focused on AI policy and governance for Africa, and also for just low and middle income countries more broadly. And now I'm both working jointly at the United Nations and the World Bank on international AI cooperation, and also just generally how to understand how to build AI to meet the needs of low and middle income countries. So very happy to be here.
Thank you so much. What about you, Hasan?
Awesome. So pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Hasan Luongo. I'm currently the general partner at Resilient 17. We're an early stage investment venture capital firm and a venture studio. Our focus is on backing African founders. Our portfolio is 85 plus companies. We've deployed somewhere around $11 or $12 million so far. We do sort of pre-seed to Series A at the very early stage, and then occasionally at the later stage. Bunch of well-known companies, Lem5, Flutterwave, the sort of a broad list, and very recently a large push across into AI, and really trying to be a signal to the ecosystem that this is a place to build and this is an area to focus. So a couple initiatives on that side. And then quickly, like my background prior to being an investor was an operator on the sort of growth side across a bunch of various technology companies, a couple of which scaled up really nicely. And then, so that was the early part of my career working in Silicon Valley, and then more recently across the African continent with Chipper Cash.
Okay, thank you so much. So I have my investor here and a co-investor here today to come and tell us about Africa's AI. To jump right into it, my very first question, and I will start with you, Hasan, is everyone is talking, there's so much buzz around AI right now, and the consensus is that this is Africa's AI moment. What does this actually mean in practice today? What do you think is real, and what do you think we are still thinking about from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think alongside Africa, it's the world's AI moment, right? So what is happening across AI is happening to everyone at the same time in real time right now, right? I think, and so, the way you can look at it a number of different ways, but I mean, even comparing AI's impact on technology, on how products get made, on how computing gets done, just its broad sort of implications across society, I think is, even now far surpassed sort of like what that impact of mobile was, what the impact of some of the sort of foundational technologies, right? So you had like the internet in the early 2000s, sort of late 90s, right? Then you had mobile, which was a massive change and obviously massively impacting the continent. And then I think AI sort of like combines those two and expands on it, right? So I view this as a very unique sort of moment in time. I think there is a lot of bubble around AI, right? There's a lot of hype. Some of these companies are absolutely going to fail. Like, this is a fact, right? But the size and velocity of some of the companies that are scaling up and just its broad impact across how people work and how work gets done is sort of unparalleled in previous technology cycles. So the question there is then now if we take that global perspective and we focus and we double click across Africa, first of all, Africa, we all know is a collection of many different countries in many different places, and so countries are really sitting at very different places. I guess against this like AI adoption curve, right? But the use case is profound and vast. It's going to show up in not only how like products act and behave, but it's how companies are built, how many employees they need to hire, which roles and functions are done by humans versus machines, all of these different things. And we're seeing some fascinating use cases, right? Some really interesting localized use cases that are heavily leveraging upon AI. And these companies are raising money, moving quickly, and scaling up, right? So you can always look at it from the side of, it's not the same thing as sitting in San Francisco as sitting in Lagos today in terms of like what the levels of AI hype are, right? And this concentration, we've seen it again, sort of like center in the Bay Area. So there's like the Bay Area and the world, and then there's like really the rest of the world, right? And so Africa is fitting squarely into that. I guess you put China in there next to it as well, right? As a major powerhouse. But from a startup innovation venture funding side, that activity is still heavily concentrated in Silicon Valley. It's been like kind of a bit of a rebirth for that segment, for that area. So those two things are not the same right now, right? But it's really, I see it more as rest of the world, and then this one like super concentrated cluster and hub, right? So I'm less looking at it from the lens of just, Africa in particular is sitting in this position. It's like a 2-horse race. It's like so anyways, broadly, that's kind of my perspective.
That's good. I have like a million follow-up questions, because now we have to compare globally and in Africa, because what you just mentioned is we have the global aspect, then we have the rest. We have the San Francisco, then we have the rest of the world. Okay, I will come back to that. Chinasa, from your own vantage point, sitting on governance and policies, what are you seeing right now in the world? Globally, let's talk globally, then in Africa.
Sure, definitely. Yeah. So, very similar to what Hasan said. And I was actually going to say it's, the world's global AI moment at the moment. And so we do see a lot of progress when it comes to the enacting AI laws, particularly from entities like the European Union. Also, we see, despite the United States lack of a federal policy framework, they've started to move towards that now, but we've seen a lot of states throughout the country, start to push out both, data privacy legislation alongside AI laws as well. And then, a lot of progress within China, which is actually, focused on really regulating AI and in very specific ways. And so no broad AI legislation, but AI legislation or laws focused on things like generative AI, and also, just generally, trying to prevent, negative or, malfeasance use cases of these respective systems. And then going to the African continent, which is where a lot of my research focuses on, 20 African countries right now either have draft or AI laws in place or national AI strategies. And I've been fortunate to work with the Nigerian government specifically on developing their national AI strategy, and then also the African Union on developing their continental AI strategy as well. And so progress is, I would say, definitely burgeoning, compared to about 44 African countries that have data privacy laws in place. The progress is actually much more faster. We have seen a lot of controversy. Just recently, South Africa had to recall their national, their draft AI law because of hallucinations that were in the document as well. So people may say that we're moving a little bit too fast, but I think honestly the continent is on pace. And so hopefully we start to see, countries like Kenya, for example. I know they're also working on a draft AI law, and Nigeria is also, going to regulate AI as part of their broader digital economy bill. And so hopefully, looking forward to seeing how that rolls out over the next couple months.
All right, thank you so much for that. That was insightful. Hasan, you currently not only invest in AI, but you also build in AI. So my question to you be, what are you seeing in real time, repeatable revenue in AI? Now, we're not talking grants used to experiment. We're talking in terms of revenue. Where are you seeing that revenue, repeatable revenue in AI as of right now?
Let's see. So I'll highlight like two of our earlier stage portfolio companies. One of them is called Times. They're an accounting software platform based in Lagos, Nigeria. Excellent team, really great traction. But what they're doing is their product is essentially twofold, right? So they actually started building an AI accounting system. So like general ledger, invoices, credits, all of your sort of functional accounting use cases. And then and going and selling that as a SaaS product that is more feature rich against, for a lower price point against some of the incumbents in the market, right? Where they have gained some really impressive traction is actually taking that underlying AI intelligence layer, bringing it into a product that is accounting system agnostic. So you're already on QuickBooks or you're on Sage or Zoho or whatever, and you have things that you need to get done, right? You have invoices that need to get filed into the ledger. You have expenses that need to be recorded, all of this thing, right? And their product is essentially like an AI assistant that can complete a wide number of accounting related skills, right? So you can just say, do this, file that, log this, send this invoice, you can send very short, simple sort of commands, and then the AI will go in and execute that task for you, right? So their revenue stream is primarily coming from Western markets in USD for any sort of small business that's running an accounting system. The founder has very little time, doesn't want to go to the accountant every single time to do manual stuff, and can just outsource that to the AI agent, right? So that's been really positive. I think another one that we're seeing that's a more kind of Africa-specific use case is AI Teacher. This is also a company based in Lagos, and they sell a whole suite of sort of assistance and generative AI functions specifically geared towards Nigerian teachers in the sort of primary school and up to high school levels, right? Of which there are many millions of teachers employed by the by the states and the governments in Nigeria, and so what they're doing is like a two-pronged strategy. One is also on that assistance side of it, where if you're a teacher in Nigeria, for, I believe, around 3,000 to 5,000 Naira per month. So very affordable. You can sign up for a subscription. You get a certain amount of credits and it will just go and do key stuff for you, right? It will create your lesson plan. It will create a template and some exercises. It will grade the exercises as they come in. It will help you develop visual materials and things to use inside of the classroom. And it works as an assistant directly to the students so that they can learn and grow on that side. So they're selling it direct to consumer or direct to end user to a teacher, and then they're upselling into the broader school, right? So it's like a SaaS B2B2C sort of play. But seeing excellent progress. Just recently closed some funding from MasterCard Foundation from the EdTech side, and producing real revenue, selling real licenses, and helping teachers reduce their workload and be a little bit more streamlined, so they can focus on giving attention to students. Really positive win, community-wise as well as from a venture side so far.
Thank you. Would you say that the retention rate has been great so far that you've seen?
I mean, I think it's progressing, right? I think as the product gets better, as the UI gets better, I think they've done an amazing job. Sort of like it was quick and dirty V1, got some initial users onto it, but have since that product has changed and improved materially over the last sort of year and a half, and it's world-class today, right? So I think it keeps getting better, and then that's really what's driving retention, is this easy to use for teachers? Does it work for them on mobile devices? Like all of the key stuff for what they need, and as those user experiences improve, they're seeing some strong retention there. So absolutely, retention's always hard, and there's always going to be a negative side to it, but they're on the positive side of the thing,
Oh, that's great. That's great. Thank you for that. For those examples. Times as well is a portfolio company of ours.
Let's go.
Super early. Yes. Thank you. Before we continue the questions, please, we will not be taking any live questions. If you do have any questions, please just use the chat. We will not be taking any live questions at this time. Thank you. To my next question, Chinasa, at systems level, do you think Africa's opportunity is primarily in applied AI? Or is there a credible path to building layers like models, infrastructure, and the likes?
Yeah, so I'm actually in favor of both. And most importantly, just because we do see that infrastructure more generally across Africa, just broadly speaking, is still very early, particularly when it comes to supporting AI-specific infrastructure. There's this interesting research that I cite a lot from the Oxford Internet Institute. And essentially, there's not a high concentration of data centers, but a decent concentration of data centers within Africa. But when it comes to AI-specific compute, it's still very low. Obviously, South Africa is a hub for, data centers on the continent, alongside Nigeria and Kenya and other countries along the coast. But again, we still are missing the fundamentals needed, to build AI at scale across the continent. And so I will say that I recently invested in Chip Mango through HoaQ. And so when it comes to actual chip design, fabrication, I'm very bullish on that. Even though I think that, we're about still a decade or so from any African country, obviously not even being on the scale of NVIDIA, just being able to produce chips generally. And so hopefully, I would say Chip Mango and other startups emerging in this space can maybe help shorten that timeline. And so that's another part of infrastructure. I think, it will be very vital as well. But when it comes to applied AI, we already see a lot of funding, a lot of support in this space, particularly from these international development funders and philanthropic organizations like Gates Foundation, IDRC, FCDO, CETA, GIZ. These are state development agencies of Germany, UK, Canada, and the UK, and other countries as well. And so I think that, AI in healthcare, AI in agriculture, AI in education, are all very essential. We just have to be realistic in terms of how companies actually develop solutions in these respective domains.
All right, thank you so much. Chip Mango, another portfolio company. So the work we're doing is obviously showing. So thank you for that shout. Hasan, my next question will be to you. So most African companies are building on global infrastructure, as we've talked about just recently. We've seen OpenAI, they're building on top of AWS, HCC, Cloudflare. So in your experience, what does this dependency actually limit? Do you think innovations, margins, or long-term control?
I mean, it's an interesting question, right? Again, it's like everybody's building off the same thing, right? There are a couple central models, everybody, everybody's essentially building off it, right? So you have sort of AI, I mean, you have OpenAI and Anthropic on one side of it. There's other ones, right? But those are like those are the foundations at the application layer that everyone is building off of. I think there's a lot of really interesting permutations happening on so when you're thinking about on device AI and low internet and bandwidth AI, where some of that application is happening, just leveraging the actual machine processor of the laptop that you're running or the phone that you're running. So we recently saw a very interesting company called PewBeam AI that is doing live voice detection inside of a church as a pastor is giving a sermon, and then the AI shows on the screen in real time the specific passage or scripture that the pastor is referencing, right? And this is often run by a 2 to 1 person media team inside of a church, depending on the size, right? And it runs entirely on the laptop, right? So yes, there's an internet connection side to it, but no internet connection, it still is listening, and it still is able to, to run their very small model sort of, and produce that. So there's a bunch of, we're going to start seeing the offline stuff really coming into play. We're also seeing some very interesting offline implications happening with a company called Terra Haptics or Terra Industries, which is a defense tech company in Nigeria that we recently invested into. And they're building, sovereign defense systems for emerging markets, starting with Nigeria, right? A bunch of their tech is meant to be, out on vast land and spaces without cell towers in every couple of kilometers or miles or whatever. So they're doing a lot of very interesting on device on device AI stuff as well, and balancing that out for their defense systems. And so I think there are constraints, right? On the data center side, on the cost of data side, on many things that I think are more difficult if I'm sitting in San Francisco versus sitting in Lagos, for example, right? But those constraints have they were true for fintech, right? They were true for mobile. They've been true for quite a while. These founders are gonna find their way through this, right? And so what we're gonna see is more unique kind of solutions against some of these issues that are form fit for the market that they're serving, right? Those are just a couple of examples, but I see it as it's a limitation, but it's not like you're excluded from it, or it's gonna hold the whole thing back. These elements have been in place. There are certain things that are different between these places. And if you sit there and just say, well, we don't have this and that, so thus we're missing this thing, you're looking at it from the wrong angle, right? It's just what do we need to do to form factor this for the use cases that we're serving? And I think that's where we're gonna see the biggest breakout opportunities emerging. And, very confident this is a much bigger category than fintech. This is a much bigger category than some of these things. And we will in 5-ish years be seeing some very consequential companies around this.
All right, thank you for that. Chinasa, from a governance perspective now, and if you can be frank, who really controls Africa's AI's future today? And do we risk becoming a primary consumer on the global AI stack?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I love being frank. And so I would say Yeah, very loaded question, but when it comes to just understanding like where the funding is actually coming from, particularly like even on the governance side of things, which is very rare and doesn't tend to happen in in Western countries, let's say. We see organizations like UNDP, UNESCO, even big tech companies like Meta, Microsoft, Google, and then also the state development agencies, GIZ, IDRCF, CDO, actually funding the development, of national AI strategies and even data strategies across African countries. And if it was a reverse, people would actually look at it very funny. But because Africa and we have this, kind of existing history of, receiving aid, it becomes normal. And I think that, this inextricably has like an downstream impact on the priorities that are actually embedded, in these national AI strategies and data strategies. And then also in terms of actually, what it means or what happens when we try to build AI ecosystems based on these AI strategies that may not necessarily be built in the best interest, of funding local innovation. And we're also seeing partnerships, again, from these big tech companies and also these newer entrants like OpenAI and Anthropic wanting to expand to Africa, and also developing these government partnerships and mostly, mandating the use of their technology, which honestly, hinders and stifles, local innovators from actually having, a tangible share or, even just the opportunity to grow and, develop their services and, and sell their services to local governments or, other companies as well. And so right now, the future is kind of like not really in our hands, but I think there's an opportunity for it to be as we reshift our priorities and ensure that, local innovation is prioritized when it comes to supporting AI ecosystems and building these AI models.
Thank you. Still on you, Chinasa. There's a popular idea that Africa's data is a gold mine. Do you agree, or do you think
Yeah,
it's overstated?
no, most
And I also
definitely.
like to hear your opinion, Hasan.
Yeah, because right now, there's this idea that okay, AI companies are running out of data. I mean, they're really running out of data basically from everything that they can access on the internet already. And then also, and most of this data is from these Western richer countries. About 60% or so of the internet is in English, and a lot of it is from forums and websites that mainly represent or have American or so users, or let's say US users. And so there's a lot of data that's missing on the rest of the world. And we know even in the US, there are lots of archives that haven't been accessed, I would say, fortunately, by these AI systems. But also when we come to the African context, the Latin American context, the South and Southeast Asian context, they're just generally, data that hasn't been digitized or, I would say set up in a way that it's been digested by mainstream AI systems. And so right now, I would say the main incentive for companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, even newer, smaller entrants like Mistral, for example, from France, to enter Africa and to build partnerships. Mistral actually has a new partnership with the Moroccan government, is to collect more data so they can refine their services and then also, start to target African consumers, particularly the burgeoning middle class.
Mm-hmm. And from your opinion, what would you say we can do differently to ensure that we have high quality data out there?
Yeah, most definitely. Again, infrastructure is definitely needed. Like you have to have the cloud clusters, computing centers, the data centers, to support the, hosting and storing this data. Also, again, I mentioned that 44 out of 55 AU member states have data privacy laws in place. A lot of these already have provisions for cross-border data sharing as well. So, and just ensuring that there's enforcement and also compliance with these respective laws is super important. And I'll let Hasan talk to you.
Thank you. Hasan, what do you think?
Fully agree. I would also just shine a spotlight on this, right? Like actually we were doing a roundtable discussion on AI in Africa like a year and a half ago, just a while back, and we had a really interesting panel. One of the panelists was a professor at Lagos Business School, right? And she was saying basically, there is this, there's like you can go and take on some of these archival sort of projects and actually produce this valuable asset, right? And so part of it is like the work is maybe you're not trying to be like a AI researcher in that career path, which is a PhD level and all of that, which Chinasa can tell us about, right? But there are ground level work to be done, taking some of the offline sort of undigitized data sets that are out there and bringing them online. I was recently talking to somebody who has an archive of a vast number of community radio stations across Africa, right? And leveraging, and they've been able to digitize that data, took the time and effort to do it, and are now sitting on this very valuable data set that they're able to sell to some of the brokers and to some of the labs, right? There is an active market of data acquisition going into the labs, right? And someone was telling me about this recently as well, that it's essentially researchers, compute, and data, right? That is the three sort of primary inputs to a company like OpenAI, right? And so servicing some of those pipelines, especially in emerging markets where those data sets are thin and light, I do think we're also seeing there's a great opportunity for your digital players like your Flutterwaves of the world or your Money Points of the world, right? Who are sitting on an absolute, massive amount of transactional data that tells an absolute story about how economies work and people transact and all of that. They're in a very good position. A couple of companies like Remedial Health and some of these health tech startups who have been around for a while, they're also sitting in a very unique position where they were digital first from the beginning. They've gotten some scale, so they're not having to do that like archiving to, from paper to digital sort of thing in order to get the data to be usable. Those there's like an antidote around like, a set of conditions on a health issue. It actually is different if this is happening to you in Lagos versus this is happening to you in Miami, for example. They actually mean different things, right? And so like that Western diagnostics of those symptoms is not the accurate diagnosis for somebody in a different climate environment situation, right? So the need for this, it's just going to progress. Like the need for the data never ends from the way these models work, right? They are meant to be so large and consume sort of all of that, data in, right? That there's just at each level, then it just unlocks a new level of data. So once you've got like a general job description of a finance manager sitting at an investment firm in Lagos and how they do their work, then there's like 3 permutations below that that will happen next, right? So also thinking about data around specific job functions, like that's what the labs are doing today, right? They're like going deeper and deeper on this, right? It's like the opportunities here are sort of staggering at the data level. And it's like you may not want to focus on building the next hot new AI app or a SaaS app or whatever. You can actually, focus on solving some of these more foundational layer infrastructure problems as well. And there's businesses to be built in these categories.
All right. Thank you so much, Chinasa. Thank you, Hasan. To my next question, there's been a lot of debate around tokens versus talent. What are your thoughts around that? Tokens being AI models and talents being talent. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a need for both. And I think I understood what you were trying to say. And for me, I'm very also just adamant on the need to develop AI talent within Africa specifically. And, not to say that everyone needs a PhD. I think a PhD is super helpful, particularly if you're approaching AI from the research side of things. And, a lot of fundamental advances in AI, particularly, from the just generally, but also like in the US and European countries like Netherlands and Germany, has actually, in Canada also, has come out of, Ph.D. research, or research being done by academic labs. And I think that this is something we haven't unlocked specifically in Africa yet, because there's this big focus on, let's say, let's adopt Llama, which is open weight, and let's adopt these other open source and open weight models, without actually taking the time to research and invest and build our own foundational models. And obviously, I don't want to downplay this, because there are, again, these infrastructural barriers that prevent the development of African countries or researchers being able to develop these foundation models. But I would love to see more research, more funding, focus on this, so we can have our own version of BERT, which is basically the fundamental infrastructure that is embedded into large language models, and actually is how languages themselves, or data itself, is tokenized, to produce these GPTs. And so I think this is something that I would love to see more investment on. And then I think that we'll start to see more, downstream impacts, and just generally like a broader diffusion of the tokens or the AI models.
Thank you, Chinasa. Hasan, do you have anything to add, rather?
No, that's
Okay.
That's a very good response.
I love that. Thank you very much. To my final question before we open it up to the community now. 10 years from now, is Africa going to be a meaningful shaper of global AI, how global AI develops, or a consumer of systems built elsewhere? What do you think? And what do you think has to be true for the first answer to be right, for us to not only be consumers, but shapers of the global AI stack? I will start with you, Hasan. And then
Sure. I'm squarely on the shapers of the global AI stack with an asterisk, right? I think there's in all previous technologies, there's never been such a sort of lead and like privatized infrastructure, I guess, right? That's being leveraged. So I mean, like the level of investment that's already going into, and that will continue going into, some of these large language models is not something that's going to like change, right? It's like you could then go allocate, your drop in the bucket, $10 billion to go do one of these things, and it's still like a quarter of like 1/4 of the spend of one of these companies in like a month, right? So like it's hard to that, like there's some unique elements about this, right? And so, but the reasons why I'm bullish about this is that if you look at fintech and you look at some of the industries that have emerged as leadership, I mean, my perspective as an American that spends quite a bit of time in across the continent, is like those financial systems in 2026 are fundamentally more advanced than they are here, right? And so if you look at NIPS and you look at some of the real-time processing systems, those are innovations born out of that, that country and those needs, and they are fundamentally better, right? They work in a broader sense. They work for more people across the world. The user experience is like, let me wait 3 days, or let me like send you the money and it shows up to you in 30 seconds, right? Like what's the difference there? It's like an order of magnitude better, right? And so that's where the confidence lies, right? And saying like we like the talent is there, the education and what's happened in the last 10 years in terms of more people trained with more experience, done more deals, built more products, all of these things. These are compounding elements that are operating in behind the scenes. All we need, right, really is like more founders building in those spaces, right? More people saying, this is it, right? This is the direction that the world is going. And we're going to like activate now so that we see the results of this in the 3, 5 year and 10-year cycles, right?
Thank you. Chinasa, Anything to add?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's an opportunity, to just really reimagine what AI development actually looks like in Africa, because I think we're honestly need to move past the paradigm of the biggest, the largest, the most, fastest AI model, because that's actually not what will meet the needs of African consumers. I was just on another webinar with Tech About right before this, and I mentioned, African consumers mostly access digital services through mobile phones, not through laptops. And many of these mobile phones are not smartphones, and so they're not going to be able, to run all these large GPTs. And just also knowing the disproportionate costs that they pay for data as well. So we have to think small, and I think mostly in terms of parameter size of the models, but also in just domain applications, because I think there's a big opportunity to really craft, these niche contextualized AI models. And actually this could probably improve adoption and diffusion of these systems, and not only just, benefit companies financially, but also, again, provide tangible value to African consumers that may, be looking to expand AI usage, or just generally benefit from AI use themselves.
Thank you so much, Hasan and Chinasa. I know I said that was the last question, but just one more last question before we open it up to everyone else. What advice would you give to founders currently in the room that are building either AI startups or AI layer to what they're currently building? What advice would you give to them? Who wants to go first?
I'll go. Yeah, so I would say just honestly be realistic and really understand the need for AI. Again, I think a lot of there's a lot of hype around AI right now. And, companies feel a pressure to adopt it by any means necessary. We're also seeing how this has basically impacted the labor market heavily within the US primarily, but also trickling down into Canada and Europe as well. Not a lot of impacts on Africa yet when it comes to labor. But I think that, just in many cases, like very simple algorithms actually do a much better job than trying to, train either adopt or procure a very large AI model or system. And so just be realistic about your need for AI. And then also, if you do decide to leverage it in your operations, again, be very measured in your approach to developing it, and also ensure that you obviously have the talent not to just implement these systems, but to maintain them for the long term.
Thank you very much. Hasan?
I mean, I would just add that you're building with the idea in mind that the state of AI is rapidly changing, right? So it's like everything is going to get faster, less expensive, and more intelligent, right? And so if you're incorporating that into your core thesis of whatever your product does, right, there's a lot of permutations today that are saying, this thing works okay now, right? But like, give it 6 months, let the model do a little bit more, and it really starts impacting value. It really starts driving value. So I think that is like a fundamental perspective to for the builder to really take on, and being like, it's not about always being at the absolute cutting edge, but it's just knowing that your base layer of what you're building on is actually going to be more, it's going to be smarter and more efficient over time, right? From a cost perspective, as well as a functionality sort of performance perspective, right? I would also say that the advantage of building a company with AI at the core today is that you're just fundamentally doing it differently than the companies that you're competing against, right? So part of your advantage is how you're leveraging it throughout your own organization, right? There's a bunch of interesting stuff coming from Jack Dorsey and Sequoia about this like intelligence layer inside of companies, right? It's kind of the hot new topic on Twitter these days, but there's some really interesting sort of elements of that in terms of how a founder thinks about building a company, and what sort of advantages that you have at the very early stage against some much larger competitors, that gives you sort of the moxie, the thing that like, we can go and take this Goldman Sachs guy down, right? Like, because we're going to fundamentally deliver more value for lower cost at higher margins with the same outputs in that sense, right? And so I think like the amount of things that are at play right now and the challenges that startups can present to incumbents that are in the, you know, in some of these industries today are vast, right? So it's like, you may not be at the cutting edge of leveraging AI in like at the research level to do some net new thing that didn't exist today, but you're fundamentally applying AI across a full stack of a business, and your unit economics are different, and that it's not that AI is going to reduce your costs to zero. You still need to pay for the compute and all of that, but it's different than paying, you know, like there's a different math to it. And what it's getting is this kind of compounding value as you get a little further along. So I think the opportunity scope is really exciting.
All right, thank you so much, Hasan. Thank you, Chinasa. This has been a great session. I'll just read out a couple of questions. If you do have any questions, please use the chat. So question from Tayo is, what are your thoughts on how best to fund infrastructural investments in models, data, and talent that will further unlock the VC and angel funded opportunities you've described here? And is there a conflict between the opportunity to digitize data and sell it to big AI companies, and they want to create contextuality, appropriate models, and cultivate African talent? Chinasa, do you want to go first? Or maybe Hasan?
I feel like this is definitely tailored to Hasan, so I'll let him go first.
So I don't think there's taking the second part of the question, I don't think there's a conflict, right? Like somebody's got to do it, and if you want to take it on, go for it, right? Like there is this idea, like you're not going to save the world from AI learning how to do things, right? Like you know, like you're not protecting anyone's job by like not giving data around that, because it's coming, right? And it's going to change, right? So, but then how, like that, the first part of that question, I think is much more challenging. I actually don't think that's a problem to be solved from at least from the early stage venture capital side of it, right? The amount of dollars or the amount of funding that's needed, right, in order to do that is usually outside of the scope of like an early stage VC, right? We're not like, you can't put $2 million into a research product that doesn't have like a path towards monetization and growth, right? So I think there's different parties that need to come to the table to do that specific part of it. And I would say it's not necessarily venture capitals, like that's not their space.
Thank you so much. I see the questions flooding in. Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. So we'll take the next 4 questions. I know we are running out of time. Please just give us another 10, 15 minutes of your time, if you can. Okay, so to the next question, do you believe African startups should focus more on the infrastructure layer or the application layer? I think we're going to talk about this.
Yeah, I feel like we kind of answered this before. Maybe I'm getting confused from my previous conversation with Tech about, but I think it's honestly, you know, a need for both. And particularly because like infrastructure, when it comes to like AI infrastructure within Africa, will look very much different. We're not going to have like these large scale AI data centers across, you know, different countries. It may be in like there's maybe just one in like a certain region, and then smaller data centers across. And even then, you know, like infrastructure itself, we have like the human infrastructure. You know, there's also governance infrastructure that has to be developed as well. And so I'm very much in favor of all like areas of this AI stack being invested in and scaled.
I would add to that and say one of the areas is energy, right? Is actual energy production, right? And so the 2 leading AI data centers of the world are the United States and China. China and the United States are the highest energy producers per capita, right? There is there is, and so even from a energy company investment side of it, they need an AI strategy as well, right? Not how to leverage, yes, how to leverage AI in their business operations, but really like, what are they doing to for this upcoming, even higher rising sort of need for electricity. And if you want to look at an economic indicator of which companies which countries are going to benefit most from AI innovation, it will go along that scale, right? So the opportunity for, let's just say Nigeria in particular, to make a leap ahead in 5 to 10 years on 5 to 20x increase in energy production per capita will dramatically change, some of the fundamentals of what we're discussing today, purchasing power, a direct leading economic indicator. So it's like, you can go down to the infrastructure layer all the way to the bottom, which is energy production, right? As a problem to be solved in what's happening from AI. So application layer, infrastructure layer, power layer, right?
Yeah. Thank you for that. Also, do you believe vibe coded AI products are scalable and worthy of investment?
100%. These systems are getting better by the moment, right? They're more capable. They're already really capable. It's like, if you don't think that all the engineers at Google and Meta are vibe coding what they're doing right now, and if they're not, like, their actual job is at risk because they're not properly leveraging like the technology that's available to them, right? Do your homework, do your testing, do all of the things that you need to do, but this is programming, right? It's no longer going to be vibe coding and coding. It's just going to be how code gets developed, right? So like that train is moving,
Yeah, I definitely agree. I also just want to say something very quickly. Like, a vibe coded startup by, a Stanford PhD is very different from someone who doesn't have, the domain experience, and particularly like the understanding of the technical, like, complex implications, of leveraging vibe coding in their work. I mean, we've already seen so many cybersecurity and just security concerns come out of a lot of these products. And so, you can vibe code all you want, but you still need to know the basics.
Yeah, your domain expertise and whatever you're doing, whatever you're applying that to, that's going to be your, that's your advantage, right?
All right. Thank you both so much. This next question, for the most part, Africa is trailing behind or has been neglected on the underlying hard rails such as education, energy, health, and so on. The very infrastructure that enables widespread cognitive participation, true, a fundamental necessity for AI. To what extent do you see AI development now forcing an acceleration of investment in that social infrastructure? And might the fact that we are trailing on those human foundations actually set us up for a leapfrog in participating in an equity that is fully built legacy system we would have locked out?
Yeah, so I thought this question super interesting, and it definitely, related to some of the comments that Hasan made earlier. And honestly, what I'm seeing now is because there's so much interest, particularly in funding and scaling AI solutions across the African continent, governments, not to say they're starting to realize, like, they should have been investing in these fundamental basics, but they're starting to scale investment in these. For example, Nigeria has a very big fiber project that's being funded mostly in part by the World Bank. And then also, again, we're starting to see more investments in energy and logistics and infrastructure, really to support, again, all the fundamentals that are needed, not only just for AI, but just generally for people to have a good standard of living. Hopefully, some of these investments trickle down into Nigeria, finally, getting a stable electricity grid. But hopefully, but more broadly, I would just say that it's super important because you can create all of these chatbots and all these AI tools in healthcare, for example. And if you want to refer, the end goal for a lot of these systems is to refer someone to get better care. But if you don't have a hospital in place or clinic in place for someone to actually, benefit from this AI solution that was telling them, to get this better standard of care, then you're not going to be able to, I would say, benefit from AI more broadly. And so again, the fundamentals are very important for scaling AI across Africa.
Thank you. To our second second to last question. What unique African AI, not different by AI data or training, do you expect to see in the next 5 years? Hasan?
That's a great question. I don't know. I think it's less of, I think not knowing is fine, right? It's kind of like you'll know it when you see it, and it's going to take somebody with that view and perspective of the problem to bring this to light, right? So I don't know is my answer to the question, right? But like we're here for it, right? Like and this is the job of the founder essentially to then say, I'm going to take this insight of something that I see in the world that's not right or that's broken and apply, and use AI to, to try to fix that. Then those like, wow, like that very obvious way of doing this is going to come to light, So we're going to continue to look for founders to show us the way on this,
Yeah, and I add some things as well. I think, and it kind of goes into a question that's been asked by Farouk, actually, because, we still have these existing fundamental issues when it comes to infrastructure and access, just to digital services. We've seen, just generally innovation around mobile money and instant, payments within Africa. And I think that kind of same idea will also transfer over to AI because, people are not going to be using these tools mostly from smartphones or even, having constant cloud access. And so I would love to see it, and hopefully this is already being done, more innovations kind of innovating around, AI not being so reliant on the cloud. And also, again, these small language, these small multimodal models.
Yeah, you want to be OpenAI today, right? Like go hyper niche into a particular thing, right? And you can have a model that's competitive. It's not general, AGI, right? But like fine, right? It has a specific use case and function, and there's real value there.
Thank you so much. So final question, I think we already spoke about this. What aspects of the current AI hype seems like a bubble from your vantage point? Is it too early to call it?
I mean, OpenAI just raised on an $882 billion valuation. Yeah. There's some hype there, right? Like, no doubt about it, even though that's probably still a pretty good investment. Like, there's some real bubble there. I think there's a lot of pressure on SaaS companies today. I mean, SaaS was the previous wave of like kind of fundable fintechy SaaS startups, right? And these companies are facing some pressure, and there's companies that are breaking out and really taking advantage and sort of accelerating, like Intercoms and Ramps and a couple of those players in the market who have sort of like fully doxed themselves on AI and are now seeing the advantage in market cap and valuations. And then there's a bunch of susceptible companies that were charging $10,000 a month for XYZ sort of software suite that is, replicable in a lot of ways for a much lower cost by a small team. So I think the idea of like thinking about it beyond the case of let me build tools and go sell those tools to somebody to do their work better, and going one step deeper into the stack and just saying like, let's compete against some of these companies now because we have this infrastructure and these processes to do these things more efficiently. So it's going to change the opportunity scope for how founders think about it. It's less about selling tools, more about like selling, doing the actual work or going farther down the value chain, right? Because the tools are getting cannibalized very quickly by AI, right?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Hasan. Thank you so much, Chinasa, for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us today, this evening here. Thank you again for joining us. Please feel free to follow our speakers. Chinasa shares amazing, insightful news on every socials, actually, and I follow her everywhere.
TikTok,
Yeah, as well as Hasan, thank you so much for sharing with us. If there are any more questions, please accommodate us. We will just send them over to you for you to answer them as well. But thank you so much for sharing with us this evening. You can also drop Thank you. You can also drop your LinkedIn so make people can follow you and follow your journey and your work. Thank you, everyone. Please, we're not done yet. We have a couple of updates we would like to share with you. I'll pass it on now to my colleague Bolu to take this on.
Thank you, Falakemi, Hassan, and Chinasa. It's been a very lovely conversation. And I think from our perspective, we've started to see different applications of AI in the startups that we see in our pipeline as people try to solve some of the problems that exist in our ecosystem. And just to run through our updates pretty quickly, my name is Bolu, and I handle venture operations at HoaQ. If you don't know me, HoaQ, just a quick reminder of who we are for people that joined a bit late. HoaQ is a community of about over 900 creators, operators, angel investors that are backing entrepreneurs, building scalable businesses in Africa or for Africa and its diaspora. We've invested over $4 million in about 120 plus startups. For people, sorry, could you go to the update slide? For people interested in the conversation and in seeing how they can potentially become a part of our community, we do have a few deals live for members of the community and people interested. There's Middleman, who is building the trade and payment infrastructure layer for Africa-China trade. So sourcing, procurement, payments, logistics, everything in one platform. Activate is building the operating system for creator marketing in Africa, so enabling businesses to find creators and pay these managed creators and pay them for brand deals. We have Grill, which was founded by Jade Oshiberu, who has worked on so many interesting creative projects in Nigeria and Africa. Some of her shows are on Netflix, including Brotherhood, Gangs of Lagos. If any of you have seen any of those movies, which are pretty popular. She's building the global streaming infrastructure for premium Black and African cinema, and striving to unlock the value of African storytelling across the diaspora, for global audiences and audiences on the continent. We also have Dodo, which is a premium spirits company building with plantain infused rum, that is set to be a category defining African, founded and African culturally relevant African spirits company. There's also Infrared, which is an AI-powered document intelligence platform and verification platform that enables individuals, companies to sort of access data from the documents that they receive. So whether it's collecting, validating, structuring, or extracting structured data from documents pretty quickly. So if you're interested in any of these deals and more deals as we find amazing companies in the ecosystem, please, you can go to www.HoaQ, which is at the bottom right of the corner of the screen right now. And we do have quite a lot of opportunities for you to be able to partake in the community, whether it's via our bi-weekly newsletter or it's via events that we host. We do virtual events, so sessions like this, we do them once a month, every last Thursday of the month. We also do in-person events, and we do have a couple of events coming up soon. So if you're interested, go to our website and you can find a bit more information on what we do and what the opportunities are to be a part of the ecosystem. If you're interested in investing in some of these companies, or just trying to figure out how you can support some of the businesses building the next generation of amazing businesses that change the landscape of Africa, then you can join our community. I think someone can post it in the chat, just how to join directly to the link, or you can go to the website and you can find a way to join our community that way. We do also review pitch decks all year long. So if you do know a startup that is amazing, so you have someone or you are building something for yourself that you think is amazing and the world needs to know about, please go to the website as well, and you'd be able to submit your pitch deck. I will try to give you feedback within about 2 weeks timeline once we review. And if we progress, then it's something that the community might potentially be able to back. Most people only know about our angel investment community, but we do have a fund as well, a $5 million fund, which a similar thesis, and it's something that people can benefit from. Next slide, please. Yes, so if you are interested, www.hoaq.co, and you'd be able to find the links to join the community. We're really interested in finding people who also have conviction about not just AI, but AI is pretty important, and it's going to be a huge part of how the ecosystem develops and the continent develops as a whole. But we also do have quite a lot of opportunities that might be of interest to you and align with your investment thesis. You can also follow us on our socials. So we're everywhere: TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. I'm not sure if we're on Facebook, but we're in most places that you can find content, and you can tell a friend. We do have a referral program on. You can get more information via our newsletter, and that's something that you could leverage onto. Now, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. It's been an amazing conversation, and we really do believe in the potential for Africa to change the ecosystem and change the global landscape for artificial intelligence and just solving the problems that people face on a day-to-day basis. Thank you so much again, Hasan and Chinasa, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you everyone. Do have a great day. Thank you everyone. I usually give you 5 minutes to let people drop off.